YouTube, welcome back. This is the Allegheny Northern in N scale, and today we are going to start working on our very first Allegheny Northern locomotive. And so originally I filmed this video with my standard as you go talk, so you're going to notice that my hands are moving differently than my voice. And then I went back and I realized I needed to clean up my thoughts a little bit, so I'm actually going to go ahead and do a voiceover. And so what I'm doing here now is I need to get the handrails off of this locomotive. And I had already done the other side. They came off relatively easy. And as you're going to see here, this side, for whatever reason, it just did not want to come off. And you know, that happens, I guess. So we you'll see the struggle here, but the basic idea is these gold Masterline series models, they have a 2-scale railing. It's not a thick sort of cheap railing on the side. They're very, very fine, and the details are exquisite, but it's just to get them off, it's really a pain. So what I'm doing is I'm using the back end of a knife. You don't want to use the blade, obviously, because you'll cut right through these things. And I'm just trying to pry up underneath the stanchion where the railing is attached to the chassis or shell of the model. And I'm just trying to pull that apart. And on the other side, I was able to pull out 1 or 2 of them in a row, and then that would pull out the next 1 or 2, and it came off real easy. And for some reason, this side just it wasn't playing ball. And so you're really going to want to take your time with this, because the last thing you want to do is damage one of these fine scale parts, And so as we go on through the model, you're going to see that I'm going to take the railing off. I'm going to take the grabs on the back off. I'm going to take the couplers off, the uncouple levers, all of the added detail, anything that can come off, I'm going to take it off, and that's just going to aid with the painting. So the whole goal here is that we're going to airbrush this thing, and anything that we can airbrush that's not in the way is going to just make the coat a lot better. And the other thing is too, the railings are going to be a different color than the body. And you can see right there, that broke off nice and free. So, we're gonna do the railings one color. We're gonna do the body another color, and so it's just gonna be easier to have all of those areas pulled aside and ready to rock. The model is already primed, so if you wanted to, you could just get into that. But we're gonna prime it here, as you see. So what I'm doing is I've got those 2 bins along the back there that you can see. They're plastic bins. This is actually a method that my dad uses when he's building models, and he keeps these bins on his workbench, and so he got me these ones. And like if he's working with, say, a certain set of paints, he'll pull those paints out from his caddy, from his drawer, whatever where he's got them, and he'll put them in those little tubs so he can kind of keep them separate for the project. But it's a great thing, for holding these small little railings and the couplers and all that sort of stuff. So if you don't have something like this on your workbench, boy, it really, really makes a difference. And it's just a nice way to do it. So I don't know what those bins are actually for. I just know what I'm using them for, but I think they were a Walmart pickup, maybe. So if you can find something like this, you can really use anything, even a small old tin can like coffee used to come in, or something like that. Would work. Just something to hold these parts, because they're small and they will go everywhere if you don't have something to hold them in. And one thing that I do want to say is, as you're watching all of this, I was able to remove all of these little fragile parts, and thankfully I did not break a single one of them. So it's the first step in getting your model primed and ready to rock and roll is to get all these little parts off. And while we're talking about I'm priming and getting these parts off, I was going to remove the shell from the chassis, and that was my initial thought. But when I actually got looking at the underside of this model, it was not just as simple as either pulling the shell off or just removing a couple of screws. And you're going to see me with a couple of false starts here. So the couplers come off, and I will tell you that the couplers that Atlas used on these, it must be it's their standard, but they are the worst couplers in the world to take apart. They didn't stay together like the microtrains. Like if you build a microtrains coupler and you clip it together, it stays together as a unit. These things, the top and the bottom, would not stay apart together, and then the coupler, the shank, everything was falling apart. So when it goes to putting these things back together, I was real close to just throwing these things out and getting microtrains couplers on here, but I eventually got it, and cooler heads prevailed, so to speak. So here I tried to take the shell off, and you know what? It just the way these SW4s are put together, it doesn't just slide off like you would think. And there's actually two set screws underneath. There's another one I couldn't find. It's hidden somewhere. And so after sort of looking at this thing, going, okay, how the hell did they put this together? I realized, you know what? Maybe I should actually pull up the instructions and look at how this thing goes together. And when I did that, I went, you know what? We're not going to take this apart. So that just stayed the way it was. But having made that decision not to take this thing apart all the way, we had to mask off the windows, the glazing of the cab anyway. As you're going to see, I just end up masking off the trucks because I'm not going to spray paint the trucks. I end up painting those with a brush. But not to go too far ahead here into the show. So what I'm doing now is I'm masking off the windows. There's a couple of things you could do here if you're painting your model for the first time, like I was here. And if you do take the cab apart, and you can usually pull that little plastic out. That's where the imitation glass, the acetate is. In my case, I thought, you know what? Rather than trying to disassemble this thing anymore, I am just going to mask it off. So I have some Tamiya masking tape that is designed to stop the paint from getting underneath it, and it's also supposed to not pull your new paint off. So what I did is I cut the pieces fairly small using the edge of my tweezers. Just sort of pushed it against the glass. You could, measure this a little bit tighter. But what I'm going to do is, after I get this thing set here, I'm just going to use that edge of the knife, and I'm going to cut right along. I was able to do this with also not damaging any of the plastic. It's time consuming, but obviously you don't want to paint over your windows. You don't want to paint over the lamp of the headlight and things like that. So it doesn't matter really what scale you're doing. You got to mask off your windows. You got to mask off your lamps. And like I said, here I'm telling you that I removed all of the items on the pilots. Originally I wasn't going to, but at the end of the day, I'm glad I did. It worked out much better as far as the painting goes. So this whole process of masking and prepping, it took a lot of time. There's probably over an hour in just getting all the parts removed and stored, getting all of the windows masked and ready to go, and just making sure, like, I double checked it because the biggest concern was that I might accidentally either cover too much or not cover enough. And what you'll see is I end up having to go back and doing a little bit of touch-up work around the windows, and that's fine. I didn't mind it. It worked out okay. But for the actual spray painting, this was a real good method. So when you're doing this, and when I cut that, I was very careful not to apply so much pressure that I scored the plastic underneath. And so I cannot stress that enough. If you scratch the plastic underneath, then your windows are going to look funky. So when I got into the trucks, I just wrapped, and I did it. I covered it the best I could all the way around. This particular model, the electrical pickups are actually hardwired from the motor or from the decoder down to the truck, which is awesome. That you're going to get the most continuous continuity that way, because you're not relying on copper parts or brass parts. Well, you're not relying on other parts to just sort of come in contact with each other. You've got a hard connection there. So that actually made this really, really nice. So what I'm doing now is I am going to prime this in a black. So I am just using the Vallejo surface primer. It's a black, and all the paints that I'm going to be using throughout this, what I'll do is I will I'm going to pop up a little graphic here to let you know what it is and the paint number, so that if you were trying to mimic this, then you would know what I'm doing. So right now what I'm doing is I'm just hitting it all with a black surface primer to get everything primed. Yes, the model is already primed, so you could theoretically just get your paint color and start slapping it on there, but I'm using airbrush to do this. So for those of you who are airbrushing, I've got mine set at right around 30 psi. When it runs, it dips down and holds about 28. So it's not, it's pretty standard pressure for this. I'm keeping the airbrush, as you can see, because it's not in shot, I'm keeping it up a pretty good distance, but I'm going for a very light, very even coat, and so that's what I've got here. Now, I'm going to do a step that you see a lot of times with the wargaming folks, and what they do is it's called a zenithal highlight, and what it does is you spray paint everything in black, like I've done here, and then you go over the top of that with a white. And what that does is it brings all the details out, and it acts as a way to show you a light source. In the case of a miniature, it's a lot more important, because you would have you would do all of your paints with the light from a certain source, and this zenithal highlight will show you that. However, it's probably not as practical for the locomotive, because the locomotive is going to move. So in theory, what's in shadow is going to change as the locomotive is moving. I wanted to do it just because I've never actually done it. It's something I watched some videos on, and I was just curious to see how it works. And so what you do is you hold the paintbrush at a basically an overhead angle, where the sun would be at at its zenith, and then you just spray down, and wherever that white paint lands, you get the light and dark effect of the shadows and all that sort of stuff that would create a shadow. So what I'm doing now is I've got the Vallejo white surface primer, and I am going over the entire model. Now, I will tell you that the end result of this is a really cool effect, and it really makes all of those details you can see here, those details just start to pop out, and you can see all the engine doors and the grates and the grills, and it does give a really coal effect, even though in the end I'm not really using it for what you would be if you were actually using this effect, say like on a war miniature or something. But it did, for the brief moment here, bring out all of those details and really show you all the stuff that's molded onto your model. So if you're not weathering your models, and I know when I'll watch videos, a lot of you are not, this is the detail that's getting missed, because you can't see it. I know even on my videos, when you watch, sometimes you see the trains roll by, and the locomotives aren't weathered. you just see this black undercarriage where the fuel tanks and the trucks are. And there's so much molded detail there that you're missing. It's kind of a shame, really. So when you weather it, you bring all those details out. But here it is with the zenithal highlight on it. So the recessed areas are dark and still in shadow, and the other sides of the model are the raised areas are all white. So it gives you a really cool effect. And right there you can see all those doors and hatches and all that. And it's just a neat look. So, okay, now that we are done with the priming, it's time to start getting our locomotive together here. And I'm going to be using several different paint colors here for the primary model, and they are all in a blue family. So blue is my favorite color. So the first thing I'm hitting it with here is actually a blue metallic. So as you're seeing this blue go on, that shininess that's actually there, that's actually on the model, and you're going to see that through all of these. So this is a glacial blue color, and I really like it. It's a nice dark, like kind of a midnighty blue with that extra sparkle in it. So it adds something that would be a proud color in a locomotive fleet. But that's going to be my first. That's going to be my first color. It's going to be my primary. So I'm going to go ahead and get this whole model covered in that, and then we are going to go on to the other stuff here. And I wanted the locomotive to be two-tone. So here you see that glacial blue, and that is a really nice color. There was a brief moment where I thought, boy, I might just leave this alone. But I am going to go back and use another color here. So that Arctic blue there from Vallejo. Now, Vallejo has two different paint lines. Well, they have several paint lines, but the two main kind is they've got the white capped paint, and that is their thicker paint that you can apply with a brush. And then they've got this version that I'm using here, which is their air version, their model air version, and it's designed to go right through a paintbrush, airbrush. So you can put any of their paints through an airbrush. It's just a matter of how much additional thinning or how much additional flow improver you have to add. But so there is the first coat of blue paint on the locomotive, and I hit everything. I hit the pilots, I hit the walkways, I hit the sides. Everything is just with this blue. Once again, note that you're still, all of the details are not being hidden here. The paint is very smooth, it's very even. I don't know if you could get the same effect going with a standard brush. I mean, you can thin the paints a little bit. You can add the flow improver and kind of keep that all moving. But it's just not the same. I mean, even the railings here. So I've opted for the pilot railings on the front and back of the locomotive to be a safety yellow. So I'm just spray painting these a safety yellow, and you saw that one go flying off. It didn't go off the table, but you got to be careful because these little tiny parts. Obviously, it doesn't take a whole lot of air pressure to send them flying. But so I'm just hitting this here with it's a Vallejo medium yellow. It's subtle, but it gives you that safety look. So that's what I was looking for here, and it's perfect. So I do the front and the back. Now, when we get to the smaller railings, they're a little more of a challenge. So there's those little grabs that are on the back of the locomotive, and I don't show me painting those, but you really got to get them good in the tweezers, otherwise they'll take off on you. So the Locomotive, now that the first coat had dried, I wanted to do a two-tone. So I wanted an even darker, non-metallic blue. So it's a dark Prussian blue that I'm using, and I wanted there to be a two-tone on the Locomotive. And rather than just doing like a top and a bottom, I decided to put it at this angle here. So all I've done is masked off the parts that I do not want to get painted over. And then I'm spraying on the Prussian, the dark Prussian blue, and it is, as you can see, it is a much darker blue. But once again, you know, I'm all about that dark blue color. I think that just looks really sexy on a Locomotive. It's a good color scheme. I will tell you that I was really torn between doing dark greens or dark blues, but the blue is what I settled on, obviously, and that is, you know, when you see the end here, I think I made the right choice. The whole thing that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep the coats light, and I want to make sure that I don't spray paint over any details. Because it's really easy to do. And so this is the first shot here where you can really see that there's the demarcation between the two blues. And obviously, to leave a Locomotive like this, like, it just doesn't look right. You know, there needed to be something between those two colors. And so I kind of thought about some different options of how I wanted to approach that. But what I ended up doing was it clearly needed a stripe, and so I thought about, you know, changing the scheme a little bit, even though I had already kind of pre-planned this as to what I wanted to do. I sort of let the plan develop as I sprayed them on. I looked at it, and what I was showing you there is my standard brush. While I'm waiting for those paint colors to dry up above, we are going to go ahead and get started with painting the trucks and the undercarriage of the Locomotive. So we'll get into the stripe here in just a little bit, but let's talk about getting these trucks painted. So I am using a gray blue here. Once again, it's a Vallejo color. I have put it into my palette, and I thinned it down with just a small amount of acrylic thinner, and that is just so that it flows a lot nicer into the trucks, and I don't get that gloopy, gloppy paint texture. I wanted it to kind of smooth itself out, and so it was, a couple of drops of paint, a couple of drops of thinner. It's I just kind of moved it around until I had a thick consistency of paint, but it wasn't like it just flowed a lot better. And then I went and then I painted the trucks and fuel tanks. And as you're sitting there thinking, boy, it's almost like you kind of were going for like a gray ghost, CSX kind of paint scheme. And I've always liked the gray ghost paint scheme with CSX. So maybe I drew a little inspiration from that, but this color combination I really liked. And once again, I stayed all in the blue families. So I've got the blue on the two different blues on the truck or the Locomotive, and now I got this blue gray on the trucks and on the underside. And when it all dries, it's one thing about these Vallejo paints, when they dry, the true color actually comes through. So sometimes you can't always tell when it's wet what that paint is going to look like. But I was very happy when these paint colors dried and you see the actual colors. It was exactly what I was looking for. Pay attention on these trucks when you're painting them, because as you can see here, we missed a few steps, and I'll go back and I'll talk through that. But when you paint the trucks, there's the top, and then there's the bottom, and then there's the insides, and you just really got to pay attention on painting to make sure you don't miss any detail. So that stripe that just magically appeared. I did forget to run the camera a little bit, and you missed that stripe. So let me tell you how I did it. It was all with the Tamiya tape, and basically every side of the stripe, I taped, and then I painted. So the colors in there, there's a white, and then there's a gunmetal is the gray. And so I added this little action stripe kind of going on here. When I do the lettering, that stripe is probably gonna make a little bit more sense, but you get the idea of what I was going for there. I needed some way to break up those two paint tones, and this is how I came up with doing it. It's kind of an advanced step, I will be honest with you. Those tapes there that I'm showing you, there's two different thicknesses. I did get some bleed underneath them, and that's why if you're looking at this, there's some areas where the line might not look perfectly straight. I think if you really wanted to do this, the best way to do it, honestly, is with some kind of a decal, because it takes the human factor out of trying to stripe the locomotive. So your stripes are perfectly straight, your colors are true, and your thicknesses remain the same. You can see, if you look at it hard enough, you can kind of see that they're a little bit off. I don't know if I'm gonna harp on that too much right now. I think what I'm going to do is let this thing ride for a while, and then I'm going to determine whether or not the stripe needs redone. But this is sort of the official paint scheme for the Allegheny Northern right now. So those two blues with the blue-gray underside, that is what I'm going with, and this little action stripe is going to appear on all of the locomotives. I think what we're going to do is we're going to play around with the lettering a little bit now as to how the Allegheny Northern gets written on there. And I'm thinking like a big A and an N somewhere, and then it can be written out. So I'm going to play around with this a little bit, because obviously I still need to detail this locomotive, give it numbers, and put all the warning stripes and everything on it. And then it's just something that needs to happen. But this is the paint scheme that we're going to go with. So it was my first attempt at doing a custom paint job, and by and large, I'm not unhappy with it. Like I said, that stripe was a little bit more difficult than I wanted, but it's not just a straight stripe either. So I may go in and try to fix it up a little bit, try to widen up that white line a little bit, but right now we're just going to leave it go. So time to put everything back together, put the railings back on, and touch up the paint with everything, and show you how that all looks together. And then, of course, take it over to the layout and show you what the final product looks like with this whole thing put together. Okay, so this is what our locomotives for the Allegheny Northern are gonna look like. And yeah, we got to get some numbers on there. We got to get some labels on there for the different doors. Got to do some weathering and all that sort of stuff. But this would be an as-delivered paint scheme. And obviously she's been cleaned and she's back on the tracks. I will tell you, in the assembly part of this, all those little railings and hoses, and boy, were they a pain to get back on there. So that took a lot of time and a lot of effort, but now that they're on there and we're up and running. All we need to do now is get some official Allegheny Northern lettering on there, and we'll have our first locomotive. Until I find the lettering or make the lettering that I want, we're going to just run it pretty much unlabeled. So it's back on the in the fleet here, and that will conclude part 1 of our custom locomotive. So this was a lot of fun. If you're thinking about doing this for your own layout, a couple of takeaways for you, and that is it's going to take some time. And I went a little bit advanced with some of the things I was trying to do. I wanted a kind of a unique paint scheme. I accomplished that, but there's some things I would do differently, especially in the masking and stuff like that. So, lessons learned: be very careful with the parts you take off. They don't like to necessarily go back on. Be very careful with how you protect your locomotive. Paint likes to go everywhere, and although I didn't have any issues, I could see where you very easily could. And keep your parts safe. That little plastic bin that I had worked wonderfully in keeping the parts safe and ready for reinstall. And then, when you start painting, I had a scheme in mind, and I realized some areas of the locomotive, they just didn't work, so I had to sort of adjust and refigure things. So don't be afraid to think on the fly. But the most important thing is, just take your time, break your locomotive into as small pieces as you can, and have some fun with it. So, this took a handful of hours. I'm probably about 10 hours into this thing at this point. And obviously I got to label it and everything and weather it. So, there's probably 4 or 5 more ahead here. But it's a fun project, and I will consider it for future models.